The silence in our Oak Creek home was heavy, the kind of silence that feels like it's pressing against your eardrums. It was 11:30 p.m. on a Tuesday, and the only light in the house came from the designer pendant lamps hanging over the marble kitchen island. I was sitting at the small breakfast nook, a plate of leftover lasagna in front of me. I'd had a long day at the architectural firm, drafting blueprints for a new library in downtown Chicago, and I hadn't eaten since noon. Elena was across the room. She wasn't eating. She hadn't eaten dinner with me in weeks. Instead, she was focused on her luggage, a sleek, midnight blue hard-shell suitcase that cost more than my first car. She was folding a silk cream-colored blouse with the kind of precision a surgeon uses. I took another bite, the fork scraping slightly against the ceramic, and the sound seemed to snap something inside her. She didn't look up, but her hands paused over the silk. "Stop overeating, Mark," she said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it was sharp, like a cold blade. "Honestly, it's just a one-week business trip with my boss, and it's really important for my promotion. I need to know you're disciplined while I'm gone. For both of us. If you can't control your plate, how can I trust you to keep things together here?" I stared at her, a piece of pasta halfway to my mouth. I'm a 6'1" man with a solid build. I've never been described as overweight by anyone except Elena in the last 6 months. Since she started working as the lead marketing strategist for Julian Vane at Sterling & Associates, her standards for everything, my clothes, my hair, and even my appetite had shifted into something unrecognizable. Before we go deeper into this story, take a second and hit that subscribe button. Give this video a like, and let us know where you're watching from. I'm curious to know how far these stories travel. Here on Family Secrets and Revenge, we know that sometimes the smallest comments hide the biggest betrayals. The sun hadn't even fully cleared the horizon the next morning when the low growl of an engine vibrated through the driveway. I was in the kitchen, nursing a black coffee. No sugar, no cream, just as Elena had suggested the night before. I looked her through the window. It wasn't the usual rideshare vehicle she took to the airport. It was a long black Cadillac Escalade with tinted windows that looked like polished obsidian. A man in a crisp suit stepped out and began walking toward our front door. "Is that Julian's driver?" I asked as Elena walked into the room, looking like $1 million in a tailored charcoal suit. "He's picking up the whole executive team," she said quickly, checking her reflection in the hallway mirror. "Efficiency, Mark. That's how high-level firms operate." "I thought the conference was in New York," I said, remembering the itinerary she'd mentioned weeks ago. "The weather report said it's snowing there. Why are you carrying a sun hat in your tote?" She paused, her hand hovering over her bag. "Only for a second. Julian changed the venue last minute. We're heading to Miami. Higher-tier clients. The New York office had a pipe burst or something. Don't overthink it, Mark. Just focus on your work." She gave me a brief, eye-dry kiss on the cheek. It felt like a transaction, not an expression of affection. As she walked down the driveway, the driver took her bags with a silent nod. She didn't look back as she climbed into the back seat. The Escalade pulled away, leaving a faint scent of expensive perfume and exhaust in the crisp Illinois air. I stood on the porch, a cold breeze biting through my shirt. Miami, a last-minute change, a private driver. The knot that had been forming in my stomach since the lasagna incident tightened. By Thursday, the house felt cavernous. Usually I enjoyed the peace of having the place to myself, but this felt different. It felt like the walls were closing in. Elena's presence was still everywhere. In the organized spice rack, the approved grocery list on the fridge with my favorite snacks crossed out in red ink, and in the lingering scent of her perfume in the master bedroom. I tried to be the disciplined husband she wanted. I went to the gym. I ate grilled chicken and steamed broccoli. But the more I tried to follow her rules, the more I felt like a stranger in my own life. She wasn't calling. The texts were the bare minimum. "Landed safely. In meetings all day. Don't wait up for a call. Dinner with the board. Very busy." I'd send her photos of the sunset or a joke about the neighbors, and I'd get a thumbs-up emoji 6 hours later. I was an architect. I was trained to look at structures and find the flaws. And right now, the structure of my marriage was showing deep, jagged cracks. I found myself sitting in the home office late that night, the blue light of my computer screen the only illumination. And I was trying to work on the library blueprints, but my mind kept drifting to Miami. I looked at the Sterling and Associates website. There was no mention of a Miami conference. In fact, their events page listed Julian Vane as a keynote speaker for a gala in Chicago that upcoming weekend, a gala he was apparently skipping. On Friday morning, I decided to do a deep clean of the office. It was a way to keep my hands busy and my mind off the growing suspicion. While dusting the bookshelf, I knocked over a stack of old magazines. Tucked behind them was Elena's old iPad. I thought she'd traded it in months ago when she got the new Pro model. I picked it up, and to my surprise, it still had a charge. I pressed the home button. It wasn't locked. The device was still synced to her iCloud. And it was like opening a window into a room I wasn't supposed to see. Notifications started flooding in the moment it connected to the house Wi-Fi. Dozens of them. I knew I should put it down. I knew that trust was the foundation of everything. But Elena had spent months chipping away at my confidence, making me feel like I was the problem. I needed to know if I was crazy. I opened the messages. There were no threads with Julian, but at the very top was a contact named Simply J. The first message I saw made my heart stop. The suite has a private pool overlooking the ocean. I've ordered the vintage champagne you like, Jay had written. Elena's reply sent a chill down my spine. He has no idea. He's at home disciplining himself. See you at the hangar, Julian. Before we continue, take a second and share your thoughts so far on this story below. I read every single one. Do you think Mark is right to look, or is he letting his insecurity drive him? Let me know in the comments. I sat in the dim light of the home office, the iPad's glow reflecting off my glasses. My thumb hovered over the screen, hesitant to descend further into the abyss. But the discipline Elena had preached was now my own. I would be disciplined in my search for the truth. I scrolled back to 3 months ago, the start of the promotion track. The messages between Jay and Elena weren't just about business. They were a tactical map of my own displacement. Mark is asking about the late nights again, Elena had typed in late February. He's so gullible. I told him we're rebranding the Midwest sector, and I'm the only one Julian trusts with the data entry. He actually apologized for being needy. Can you believe it? Julian's reply came seconds later. Good. Let him apologize. Men like him are built to provide the background noise, while people like us compose the symphony. I have the penthouse in Chicago booked for Thursday. Tell him you're at a seminar in Evanston. I remembered that Thursday. I had spent 4 hours making a homemade boeuf bourguignon to celebrate her hard work. She had come home at midnight, smelling of a cologne that wasn't mine, and told me she wasn't hungry because she'd had a protein bar at the seminar. She'd looked at the pot on the stove with such disgust, telling me that heavy fats were the reason I lacked the executive edge. I felt a surge of bile in my throat. It wasn't just the cheating, it was the psychological warfare. She had been gaslighting me into believing my very existence, my cooking, my body, my career, was a hindrance to her success. I began a meticulous screen recording of the entire chat history. I didn't just want the text. I wanted the timestamps, the attached photos of hotel room service receipts, and the disappearing photos that she hadn't realized were still cached in the device's memory. I was an architect. I knew that a building doesn't fall because of one bad brick. It falls because the foundation was poured with sand instead of concrete. Our marriage was a beach house during a hurricane, and I was just now seeing the waves. The sun began to bleed through the blinds of the Oak Creek house, but I hadn't slept. I had moved from the iPad to my professional workstation. I needed more than just, he said, she said. I needed the money trail. Elena and I shared a high-yield savings account intended for our future dream home in the city. I logged in, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. The marketing misc expenses I'd seen earlier were just the tip of the iceberg. I found a series of transfers, $500 here, $1,200 there, labeled as education reimbursement and consulting fees. They were being moved to a private Venmo account I'd never seen before. I pulled up the Venmo history. The recipient was JV Private Holdings. I called Sarah, my friend in corporate travel, at 7 a.m. on the dot. I knew she was an early riser. Sarah, I need you to be a shark for me. I need the corporate billing address for the Azure Bay Resort booking. Was it a personal card or a company card? I waited, the silence on the line stretching. It was a Sterling and Associates corporate black card, Mark, she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. But here's the kicker. The requisition form for the trip was filed under Client Acquisition, Henderson account. There is no Henderson account, Mark. Julian is billing his mistress's vacations to his wife's company. A cold, hard smile spread across my face. This wasn't just a divorce anymore. This was a corporate embezzlement case. Sarah, can you get me a copy of that requisition form? I need the proof that Elena signed off on it as the authorized strategist. I need her signature next to his. I'll see what I can do. But Mark, if you do this, you're not just leaving her. You're detonating her life. She already detonated mine, I said, looking at the empty chair across the kitchen island. I'm just clearing the rubble. Friday night in Oak Creek usually meant a quiet dinner. But as I sat in the glow of the iPad, the man who enjoyed those things was dying. I didn't pack her bags. I didn't call her screaming. Instead, I went to the kitchen and grabbed a trash bag. I walked into the pantry and began pulling out every single approved item she had bought for my discipline. The organic, flavorless rice cakes, the powdered green shakes that tasted like lawn clippings. I dumped them all. I went to the store and bought a thick ribeye steak and a bottle of heavy red wine. If she wanted me to stop overeating, I was going to do the exact opposite. Or I was going to nourish the man who was about to fight for his life. As the steak sizzled, I sat at my laptop and began a folder titled Project Azure. I moved every screenshot from the iPad into an encrypted cloud drive. I downloaded our joint bank statements. That's when I found the marketing misc line items, thousands of dollars used for professional wardrobe that I now realized was for Julian's benefit. She had been stealing from our future to fund her audition for A Life with a Millionaire. I spent Saturday morning researching Julian Vane. On the surface, he was a titan of industry. But Julian didn't build the firm. He married it. His wife, Claire Sterling, was the only daughter of the late Arthur Sterling. Claire held 51% of the voting shares in a trust. Julian wasn't a king, he was a consort. And a consort who gets caught with a marketing strategist in a private villa is a consort who loses everything. I began drafting a letter. I didn't use emotion, I used facts. I used dates, flight numbers, and the marketing misc expenses that were clearly a misappropriation of company funds. I was an architect. I knew that if you hit the load-bearing wall, the entire roof comes down. At 2 p.m. on Saturday, my phone buzzed. It was a FaceTime call from Elena. I checked my reflection in the monitor. I looked calm. I swiped to answer. The background behind her was a blur of turquoise water and white sand. "Hey, baby," she chirped. The jazz music in the background was faint, but I recognized it. It was the same playlist Julian had mentioned in his messages. Just taking a quick break between workshops. How are you doing? Are you sticking to the meal plan? I've never felt lighter, Elena, I said. I'm shedding a lot of unnecessary weight this week. Good, she said, missing the subtext. I'll be home Sunday night around 8. Maybe we can go for a run together on Monday morning? Start the new week fresh? I'll be waiting, I said. Enjoy the workshops, Elena. I drove 45 minutes to Lake Forest, an enclave of old money. I knew from my research that Claire Vane spent her Saturday mornings at the Gilded Bean, an exclusive coffee shop. I sat in a corner booth with a thick manila envelope. At 10:45 a.m., she walked in, poised, wearing riding boots and a tailored vest. I watched her sit. She opened a leather-bound planner and began making notes. She looked like a woman who valued order above all else. Julian was her chaos, and I was about to give her the tools to eliminate that chaos forever. When she stood up to take a call, I moved. It was a fluid motion. I didn't look at her. I slid the envelope onto the table, tucked half under her planner. Inside that envelope wasn't just the iPad screenshots. It was the Venmo history, the requisition form Sarah had found, and a detailed map of the marketing misc expenses. I walked out the door just as she was hanging up. I caught a glimpse of her in the rearview mirror as I backed out. She had returned to the table. She had picked up the envelope. Her posture went rigid. If you were in Mark's shoes, facing a situation like this, what would you do? Share your thoughts in the comments. The drive back to Oak Creek felt like a victory lap, but a hollow one. I started thinking about our wedding day. It had been a small affair. Elena had cried during her vows, promising to be my anchor. I realize now that an anchor doesn't just keep you steady, it keeps you stuck at the bottom while the ship sails away. She had been planning this for a long time. The comments about my weight, the discipline, the executive image, it was all a script Julian had written for her. He wanted a woman who looked like a VP, and she wanted a man who looked like a CEO. I was just the placeholder, the dead weight that had helped her pay the rent while she climbed the ladder. I went into the guest bedroom and opened the closet. It was full of clothes I'd bought her. I realized then that I didn't hate her for the cheating. I hated her for the theft of my self-worth. I sent a text to our joint group chat with our neighbors. Hey everyone, Elena and I are making some big changes. I'm hosting a clear the pantry dinner tonight. Stop by for some wine if you're around. I wasn't just going to out her to Claire. I was going to ensure that when she walked into this neighborhood, she was walking into a room full of people who knew exactly who she was. Sunday arrived with a heavy, overcast sky. I spent the day moving my essential documents to a storage unit. I didn't want anything I loved in the splash zone when the bomb went off. I sat in the living room as the clock ticked toward 8 p.m. I didn't turn on the lights. The headlights of the SUV swept across the walls. I heard her heels on the driveway, that confident, rhythmic clicking of a woman who thought she had won. The front door opened. Mark? Why is it so dark? Did the power go out again? She fumbled for the switch. The room flooded with light, and she jumped when she saw me. Jesus, Mark, you scared the life out of me. Why are you sitting there like a gargoyle? How was the trip? I asked, my voice flat. It was grueling, she said, already moving toward the kitchen. Meetings from dawn until dusk. But it's worth it. The board is fast-tracking the VP position. We're going to be set, Mark. The Gold Coast, I repeated. That's a long way from Oak Creek. A long way from the dead weight. She frozen. Her hand was on the handle of the refrigerator. She didn't turn around. I was just thinking about your messages, Elena. The ones where you told Julian that I was like an old coat you'd outgrown. The silence was so thick you could hear the ticking of the clock. Elena didn't move. Her eyes were locked on her own words on the iPad screen I had set out. Mark, she whispered, her voice cracking. It's not what it looks like. Julian is just, he's flamboyant. Flamboyant? I asked, standing up. Does he tell everyone he's ordered the vintage champagne for their private pool? Does he call every employee's spouse deadweight? You ruined it, she hissed, rage replacing her shock. You spied on me? This was my career. If Julian finds out— Julian already knows, I interrupted. Or rather, his wife does. I dropped off an envelope yesterday. By now, I imagine the Sterling family lawyers have already changed the locks on his office. Elena's phone began to vibrate inside her bag. She scrambled to grab it. It's Julian, she breathed. She answered it on speaker. Julian Vane's voice sounded like a cornered animal. Elena, what the hell did you do? He roared. Claire kicked me out. She's frozen the accounts. Security just escorted me out. They said they have evidence of embezzlement and inappropriate conduct. Was it you? Julian, You're finished, Julian screamed. The board is meeting to terminate your contract for cause. Your badge is already deactivated. You ruined me. The line went dead. You ruined everything, she whispered, looking at me with pure vitriol. All because I told you to watch what you eat? You're a small, petty man, Mark. No, Elena, I said, throwing a duffel bag at her feet. I'm a disciplined man. I'm just following your advice. I'm trimming the fat. I'm removing the things from my life that don't serve the new direction I'm taking. The house is in my name. My parents provided the down payment. You have 10 minutes to take what's in that bag and leave. Before we go deeper, I would love to hear your point of view. Tell me what part hit you the hardest in my story and share your thoughts in the comments. The next few months were a master class in architectural precision. My lawyer used the evidence from the iPad to prove dissipation of marital assets. Every dinner and flight Julian had given her was billed to the company. It all came out. Because the business trip was proven to be a fraud, the court looked unfavorably on her claims for alimony. Julian Vane fared even worse. Claire Sterling used the evidence I provided to trigger a morality clause in his contract, stripping him of his stock options. He went from a Lake Forest mansion to a rented condo in 3 months. It was a Sunday morning in October. I was sitting at a local diner. The waitress brought over a plate of blueberry pancakes and thick-cut bacon. I wasn't overeating. I was finally feeding a soul that had been starved for appreciation for years. I saw a notification on my social media. A suggested friend. It was Elena. Her profile picture showed her sitting in a cramped beige apartment. She looked older. The glow was gone. She was working as a junior copywriter, a job she would have laughed at a year ago. I didn't feel triumph. I just hit block and went back to my breakfast. I drove back to my house. My house. It was full of light. There were no approved lists on the fridge. I realized that the business trip had been the best thing that ever happened to me. It taught me that the people who try to make you feel small are usually the ones terrified of how big you'll become once they're gone. I picked up my keys and headed out. I had a life to live, and for the first time, I had a very healthy appetite for the future. Thank you so much for watching this journey with us. This story reminds us that the people who try to control our smallest habits are often the ones hiding the biggest secrets. If you enjoyed this story of justice and self-discovery, please hit the like button and subscribe to Family Secrets and Revenge. We truly appreciate your support and love reading your overall thoughts on how this story ended. Do you think Mark went too far? Or did Elena get exactly what she deserved? Let us know in the comments below.